Miles Davis was about to walk on stage for the first time in 5 years. In the audience, musicians, critics, fans, some hoping for a miracle, most expecting disappointment, all wondering the same thing: does he still have it? Miles was 55 years old. He hadn't performed in public since 1975. 6 years of silence, 6 years of rumors about his health, his addiction, whether he'd ever play again. The music industry had written him off. He's done, they said. Too old, too sick, too far gone. What happened next would prove them all wrong. But to understand that June night in 1981, you need to understand the 6 years that came before it. 1975. Miles Davis retired from music. It wasn't a planned retirement. It wasn't a farewell tour or a final statement. Miles just stopped. His body was failing. Decades of pushing himself physically, creatively, chemically were catching up. His hip was destroyed. He could barely walk. The pain was constant. He was taking painkillers, strong ones, prescription at first, then whatever he could get, then cocaine, lots of cocaine. Miles holed up in his New York brownstone, drew the curtains, stopped answering the phone, stopped seeing people. His trumpet sat in the corner, untouched. Friends who managed to visit him were shocked. The house was a mess. Miles was a mess. 70 pounds heavier than his performing weight, moving slowly, speaking even slower. "Miles, you should play," someone would suggest. He'd shake his head. "I'm done with that. What are you doing with your time? Watching TV." That's it. For 5 years, that's what Miles Davis did. Watched television, took pills, did cocaine, let his body deteriorate. The music world moved on without him. New artists emerged. Jazz fusion evolved. The landscape Miles had created continued without him. Journalists would occasionally write obituaries in waiting. Whatever happened to Miles Davis? Articles full of past tense, as if he were already gone. Columbia Records, his label for 30 years, dropped him. They'd already been in conflict. But this sealed it. An artist who won't record can't make you money. By 1980, most people in the music industry had accepted it. Miles Davis would never perform again. He'd retired, or more accurately, he'd given up. Some people closer to Miles saw it differently. His girlfriend, Cicely Tyson, the actress, refused to accept that Miles was done. She saw glimpses of who he'd been, moments when talking about music. His eyes would light up briefly before fading again. "You need to play," she'd tell him. "I can't." "You can. You're choosing not to." "My hip. I can barely stand." "So sit." Dizzy sits when he plays now. "You can sit?" Nobody wants to hear an old man sitting down playing trumpet. "Miles, you're not old. You're 54. In music years, I'm ancient." But Cicely kept pushing. So did a few others who hadn't given up on him. Slowly, something began to shift. It started small. Miles picked up his trumpet one day, just held it. Didn't play. Just held it. The next week, he put the mouthpiece to his lips, blew a few notes. They sounded terrible, weak, breathy. Nothing like the Miles Davis sound people knew. He put the trumpet back down, but a few days later, he tried again. This time, a few more notes. Still weak, still not right, but something was there. Over months, Miles began practicing, quietly, secretly, not telling anyone. His lips needed to rebuild strength. His breathing needed work. His technique needed rebuilding from almost nothing. But muscle memory is powerful. Slowly the sounds started resembling music again. By early 1981, Miles had made a decision. He was coming back. Not because the music industry wanted him to. They'd already written him off. Not because he needed money. He had enough to survive. He came back because the alternative, sitting in that brownstone watching TV until he died, was worse than the fear of failing publicly. When word leaked that Miles was planning a comeback, the reaction was skeptical. He hasn't played in 6 years. He's 55 years old. He's been doing cocaine for years. His body's destroyed. This is going to be sad. Someone should stop him. Even people who loved Miles worried this would damage his legacy. Better to remember him as he was than watch him struggle through a comeback he couldn't pull off. George Wein, the promoter who'd given Miles his 1955 Newport comeback chance, got a call. Miles wanted to book concerts. Wein was honest. "Miles, are you sure about this?" "I'm sure." "Have you been practicing?" "Every day for months." "Can you still play?" "Come to my house. I'll show you." Wein went to Miles's brownstone. Miles played for him. It wasn't the old Miles, not yet, but it was Miles. The sound was there. The ideas were there. Wein believed. They scheduled a comeback. Small venues first. Boston, New York. Test the waters. June 27th, 1981, Kinks nightclub in Boston became the site of Miles's first public performance in 6 years. The venue was packed. Everyone wanted to see if Miles could still do it. Or more accurately, everyone wanted to witness either a triumph or a disaster. Either way, it would be historic. Miles arrived early, went to the dressing room alone. His band, new musicians, young guys who'd grown up listening to his records, were nervous. Miles was calm, calmer than he'd been in years. He knew what people were expecting. An old man, a has-been, a legend unable to live up to his legend. He was going to prove them wrong. The lights dimmed. The announcer, "Ladies and gentlemen, Miles Davis." The audience erupted. Cheering. Applause. People standing. Miles walked onto stage. Not the young, thin Miles of the 50s. Not the electric, cool Miles of the 70s. This was a different Miles. Heavier, older, moving carefully. He sat down, took out his trumpet. The room went silent. Miles put the trumpet to his lips. And he played. The first notes were tentative. Testing, finding his way back. But then, something shifted. The sound, that unmistakable Miles Davis sound, filled the room. Not exactly like it used to be. Age had changed it. The years had changed it. But it was undeniably Miles. The band came in. Young musicians playing with a legend. You could hear the respect in how they supported him. Miles played. And kept playing. One song became two. Two became three. The audience, skeptics, critics, fans, all realized the same thing. Miles was back. Not a shadow of his former self. Not a pale imitation. This was Miles Davis, evolved, different but still brilliant. The energy in the room became electric. People who'd come expecting failure were witnessing resurrection. When Miles finished the first set, the ovation was deafening. People weren't just applauding the music. They were applauding the courage, the comeback, the refusal to stay down. In the break, critics who'd written Miles off were recalibrating. Musicians in the audience were stunned. Wynton Marsalis, young trumpet player at the time, was there. "I came expecting to see an old man struggle. I saw a master still teaching." When Miles came back for the second set, he played with even more confidence. The rust was shaking off. The years were falling away. This wasn't just a comeback. This was a statement. By the end of the night, everyone in that room knew they'd witnessed something special. Miles Davis, written off by the industry, had proved them all wrong. The reviews came out the next day. The critics who'd been skeptical were eating their words. Miles Davis is back, and he's still Miles Davis. Don't call it a comeback. Call it a continuation of genius. If you thought age would diminish Miles, you don't understand Miles. But the most important review came from the musicians. Herbie Hancock. Miles showed us that creativity doesn't have an age limit, that you can walk away, come back, and still be yourself. The Boston concert was just the beginning. Miles kept performing. More shows, better shows, building momentum. By the fall of 1981, he'd signed with Columbia again, the label that had dropped him. They recorded The Man with the Horn, his comeback album. It wasn't his best work, but it didn't need to be. It proved he was back, still relevant, still creating. The 1980s became Miles's comeback decade, not a return to who he was, an evolution into something new. He collaborated with younger artists, hip-hop producers, pop musicians. He kept moving forward. The industry that had written him off had to acknowledge they'd been wrong. Miles played for another decade, until 1991, right up until months before he died. He never stopped again. The 5-year retirement taught him, stopping is harder than continuing. Looking back at that 1981 comeback, what's remarkable isn't just that Miles came back, it's that he came back on his own terms. He didn't try to recreate his past. He didn't play his greatest hits to prove he could still do it. He came back as who he was at 55, different from who he'd been at 35 or 45, and he dared the world to accept it. The industry said, too old, too sick, too far gone. Miles said, watch me. The critics said he should stay retired. Miles said, I decide when I'm done. The skeptics said, this will be embarrassing. Miles said, for you or for me. That June night in 1981, Miles Davis taught everyone watching a lesson about comebacks. It's not about proving you're still who you were. It's about proving you're still becoming something. Age doesn't matter. Years away don't matter. What matters is whether you still have something to say. Miles, at 55, after 6 years of silence, after everyone counting him out, walked on stage and said, I'm not done yet. And he wasn't. He played for 10 more years, created new music, influenced new generations. All because he refused to accept the industry's verdict that he was finished. The 1981 comeback wasn't Miles's greatest performance. His greatest albums were behind him, but it might have been his most important statement, that you can fall, you can disappear. People can write you off, but if you decide to come back, if you put in the work, if you refuse to accept other people's limitations, you can prove them all wrong. Subscribe for more stories about comebacks nobody believed in, about artists who refused to stay down, and about proving the doubters wrong. Because the most powerful performances aren't always the most technically brilliant ones. Sometimes the most powerful performance is simply showing up when everyone said you couldn't.